the need to decriminalize, of course, is what you write about in order to kind of manage things that are now not being managed by good people. In other words, the criminal element is managing it. But is legalization necessary in order to achieve that end?
Well, decriminalization is usually understood, Amanda. You wouldn't be getting at the illicit market at all. Remember, Portugal decriminalized most of all recreational drugs about 15 years ago. But all that means is that you can have the drugs on your personal possession, and you can have up to 10 days of the drugs. But you still have to go to the illicit market. There's still no quality assurance. There's no tax revenue from government. Legalization and regulation crosses that boundary and says we're going to confront the illicit market. There's going to be quality assurance, and there's going to be tax revenue and a full strategy of harm reduction measures. Okay. That's what we're up for.
Okay, and we're obviously headed down that path. Bruce, you have a business that will capitalize off of the legalization of this. I guess I want to ask you, and I want to talk to both of you about this, because it feels as though we've gone down this path for all the right reasons, but at the end of the day, Bruce, you cannot claim to be selling something that's good for anybody. It's bad for its users, no matter what. And how do we square that? How do you square it, that you're selling a product that will harm people?
Well, it's almost always a bad idea to disagree with the host, but there is a reason that it's available medically. And the reason is that the courts in Canada determine, in fact, it's not bad for everybody. There are medicinal uses, and so more of the harm, I would argue, that comes out of the current supply is the supplier, because they're selling more than just marijuana, and probably, as your other guest commented, the fact that they can grow it in any way they want, that there's no quality check. So you want to get the message out, this isn't for everybody, isn't for no reason, but you want to get rid of the unknowns more, is where I think more of the harm accumulates.
So I think that's a really good point. Certainly medical marijuana has well-established uses, so I'll roll back that part, that it isn't good for anybody. But we know that this will, we suspect, I should say, that legalizing will introduce a whole bunch of new users and bring users out into the open in a new way. Have we had enough of a conversation about the damage that that might do to people?
Well, I think we have had a conversation. We're going to have a continuing conversation, because I can assure you my focus is harm reduction strategies. And I think the Task Force in Fairness is very aware of that. They said the driver here is going to be public health considerations. So I think we're in pretty good shape that way. There obviously will have to be more a conversation, and we're going to have that conversation through the parliamentary process. We also know that two of the provinces, Manitoba and Alberta, said, you know, we need to slow this down. We need to take greater care. And I'm all for that, but at the end of the day, I would agree with your other guest. I mean, I think legalization and regulation, to quote The Economist, is the least bad policy, because what we have now is not working and causes great harm.
So Bruce, and you make the point that at the moment this is a product that is being sold by bad actors, by illegal actors, and that they sell other things. Is it your expectation that they will just get out of this market and hand it over to you regulated folk in the open market, and no longer will that element be involved, or will you be competing with that portion of society?
Yeah, so I think the competition, the task force did a pretty good job of balancing that, right? So whatever we don't make doesn't mean it won't be made, it'll just be made by the current sources. And so they looked at 18 is an earlier age than I think many people expected, but they recognize that we need to not just say they won't get it, how do we get education to them? And so I think what you're going to find is what Tweed makes is going to be understood to be sort of in a supply chain that makes sense, and that it'll be to an audience that has to get educated, and the big obligation that's going to land on the sector is about education, and that really it won't even just come down to price. If you have your choice and you want to get cannabis, you want to get pot, you have a choice to buy it from a source that you know is legal and what's in it for sure. And so I think the migration will be to that for a lot of people, and that'll be very hard on the actors selling marijuana. Now this is a group which is very entrepreneurial, so I'm sure they'll find other ills in society to fulfill, but I think marijuana is going to be tough for them, and I think enforcement is going to be easier because it'll be really clear who is doing it legally and who's doing it illegally.
Well, I want to talk to you, I want to ask both of you. Bruce, I'm going to start with you. This is clearly still an unfolding situation, so you have some clarity today on where your business might go. And there's a lot of enthusiasm priced into your share price about what that means, and some would say a little over enthusiasm. But there's a lot of non-clarity. There's the things that may go one way or another. How do you manage your business forward in the next sort of year, however long it takes, without knowing, for instance, where you'll be selling, what the final age might be? There's all kinds of uncertainty still.
So we've started about 2.5 years ago having product available for the medical market. That market's gone from 0 patients to over 100,000 now. And the number of doctors writing is growing. So we have a very good business in the medical business. But I think what people are probably more excited about than just rec in Canada is the fact that, as you pointed out at the beginning, we're the first G7 country to tackle this. We won't be the last. But if you're the company that's the best at managing this policy environment and becoming, I'll call it branded, quality, a trust equation that resonates, imagine next where this could go, but it'll be somewhere else in the G7 or G20, and Tweed will be pretty well situated, I think, to do that. So I think that the share price reflects the medical now, the rec possible, and the international likelihood.
Bill, he raises one point that has kept some investors certainly away from these stocks, and that is, if you own it, are you suddenly a foul, for instance, U.S. immigration? If we know that the legalization in some place still puts you offside some other jurisdictions.
Well, it does, and I think I agree with much of what the other guests has said. I don't know about the share price, but in terms of a wild card, we have to think about Mr. Trump. Remember that marijuana is still illegal at the federal level.
Yep.
And his Attorney General designate is Jeff Sessions. He said a couple of months ago, good people don't smoke marijuana. So if Mr. Trump and Mr. Sessions decide that this is part of the new Trump land, that could cause a lot of discomfort, both for your guest and his corporation, but also Canada and its compliance with international covenants, most of which are on drug control, most of which are focused on prohibition. Mm-hmm. So that could be a real wild card in terms of where this is going.
Not a lot of time, Bruce, but how do you respond to that, the concerns about the fact that it remains illegal in the U.S.?
Well, I'm in your New York studio. I think Mr. Trump can actually hear me when I speak because I'm that close to his apartment. I think what's really happening is north of the border, we're following a process. South of the border, it's federally illegal. So I think really what Canada's doing is proper, and it won't be caught up in cross-border. If we're a pharma company making something not approved in the U.S. but approved in Canada, it would have no heartache. Same thing for what's going to happen with marijuana.